It is, isn't it? Because it's interesting as well. Because often with the GPs, they're going to follow the trend that's in media. So
Yeah.
when something becomes a
Yes.
talking point and everyone's talking about it,
Mm.
and and I remember in the 90s it became a big thing that people shouldn't be ashamed of being depressed. They should go and take their antidepressants. And now we have Mental Health Month, Mental Health Day, Mental Health Awareness Week, and all of these things. And but with that became, well, we'll give you some antidepressants. And I've started to see or notice that GPs are now starting to stop that trend a little bit. But like you said, one of the things that you and I discussed last time, and I've discussed in previous podcasts, is the lack of knowledge and the lack of awareness about how I was about to say what the menopause is, but everybody thinks that's probably a good way to say it. People think they know what the menopause is, and then when the menopause starts happening, everyone's like, "I don't know what's wrong with me."
Yeah.
And
And also women might actually, and this often happens, really not realize themselves that that is what's going on, and that it takes a partner, a girlfriend, daughter, maybe mum, if you have that relationship with your mum, and she, went through menopause herself, kind of being open to the conversation about change, which is often not the case. So this is new territory. But often for women, it's like, and I'm hearing this more and more actually, which is great. So the education, the news is getting out there.
yeah,
It's, hey, mum, sister, girlfriend, maybe this is menopause. And that can be the trigger, that acknowledgement, that mirror, that recognition that perhaps you're going through this.
because this is something else that just occurred to me as well is, and I'm not trying to put a perspective from a men's point of view, but I do think it offers a difference for balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
As men get older, we know when something's not right because we don't get an erection. It's not a feeling. Do you know what I mean? It's not a feeling.
Just doesn't happen.
Yeah, you wake up in the morning, you're pointing in the wrong direction because you're normally
Yeah.
staring up at me as soon as I wake up in the morning. And when that doesn't happen, you know you're tired, stressed, or your testosterone's dropping. It's
Mm.
it is as subtle as being hit in the face with a breeze block.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no escaping it. There's no denying it. You're like, literally, something's not up.
Yeah.
So something is,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
that's how simple it is for men. So when there's no like clear markers, there's nothing that blatantly, when you wake up in the morning, is banging on the mirror saying, "Oi, have you noticed?" It's like, how do you start? How do you have a conversation? How do you? And you said something
Yeah.
earlier that was fascinating as well, because you said something along the emotions that come in about sexuality. Am I still attractive? Am I still desirable? Am I still functional? Am I still worthy? Do I have a place or a purpose now? Because I'm effectively starting to become infertile.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And we are the only creatures on the planet, bar whales and a couple of fishes, who aren't fertile for the whole of our lives.
Yeah.
So for women at menopause, there is this huge question that comes up about worth, and it might be very basic to talk about fertility in relation to worth, and I'm sure that will raise a lot of hackles to think about it like that. But there is an aspect of survival of the species, and an aspect of us that we really haven't looked at till now is what happens beyond being fertile. What happens beyond being fertile is post-menopause. And that period of time is something that we are not really yet talking about. And I usually say the things that we need to talk about as three B's post menopause, which is bones, bladder, and brain. And those are the areas that we need to look after in our society. And that brings me back really to your conversation about depression. And when you mentioned that about mental health, And I remember meeting and reading an article many years ago by Patrick Holford, and he put it very clearly that the studies that there are that show that at the root of depression, or part of the depression conversation, is a lack of minerals. And so for brains, bladder, and bones, particularly bones, we'll be talking about mineral wealth. So what comes up again at menopause is a need to nurture, is the need to nourish, is a need to replenish and restore, because we are very good in our culture at being demineralized because there aren't the nutrients in the food. So it's looking at the pathways by which we absorb nutrients that is fundamental. So to come back to, when you said about the GP not listening or not hearing, a really useful thing to know and to understand is that all the GP can really do is give you some blood tests. And I would go for that if you're feeling that you're out of sorts and you are wondering if it's perimenopause, is go to your GP and ask to have your bloods done. But your blood tests, having your bloods done is such a kind of movable feast. When I compare clients' blood tests from last year to this year, I'll be going, well, last year they tested everything. This year they've just tested a third of that. So I can only make comparisons between what's happened this year and a third of what they showed us last year. That's very common. So you do need to go with a little bit of knowledge to your GP and say, I'd like to have my blood test done because I think I'm perimenopausal and I would like to know my hormonal status. And then they will look at hormones. But that said, I would also say, please look at my thyroid if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling a bit low emotionally, if your bowel is slow, constipation being an issue, or IBS, or dry skin's cropping up, because these could indicate that the thyroid is low, and that is common at menopause. So those are the things that the GP could test for if they are thinking, oh, well, I'll do some tests. Or if you go with some knowledge and ask them. But I will say that blood tests aren't the best measure, because if something is showing up on your blood, in your bloods, then it really is a time to take action. And that there are other tests you could do which show way before it being evident in your blood that there is an issue. The other thing that I'm going to throw in actually is anemia. Blood tests are good at showing whether you are low in iron. And if you're low in iron, I would also be looking at other minerals generally. So just to say, beyond blood tests or the tests that the GP will do, which are blood tests, may or may not show that there is an issue. And I have many, many women coming to see me who show me that their thyroid is low, but their blood tests don't show that. And they'll say, well, my GP said my thyroid's fine. And I'm like, not from your symptoms. It is crashing. So other types of tests which you can go for that are useful, they're called hair mineral analysis tests, and they will show what your mineral wealth is like and whether you've got heavy metal toxins knocking about, things like aluminium.
Same tests they do to see if you've had cocaine, cannabis.
Yeah.
No, that's where those for court cases and stuff like that. That's what they use, because cocaine
absolutely.
can stay on a hair strand or something for 6 months.
Yeah, and cocaine actually is a drug, is an interesting one, because there are studies that show that it's one of the most difficult drugs to shift from your system when it comes to detox. So it's worth knowing that if you've been a bit of a cokehead in the past, you're going to need to do a lot of liver cleanses at menopause. Just putting that out there.
Well, I was going to say the amount of fathers over the years I've coached who are going through divorce, and they said the mother has demanded drug tests. How long do you think I need to be? And I was just like, you haven't done any cocaine, have you? They're like, yeah. And I was just like, you're fucked. Because
it's changing the system.
Well, yeah, because cannabis, I think, like skunk cannabis and stuff, I think is in your system on a hair strand for about 3 months, give or take. It's different for everybody. But cocaine its markers are there for about 6 months in your hair.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Like we get in a whole other conversation. Yeah. And it's interesting, when I look at detox, it's like, oh, well, does that change if we do a detox? We do need to individualized. So a lot of this conversation is about this, but hair mineral analysis tests are interesting. They'll show whether you've got lead, mercury, aluminium, cadmium knocking about, arsenic, this type of thing. And they'll show what your mineral wealth is. And that could be useful if you're feeling tired, depleted, etc. And then the other type of test, which is far more comprehensive, it's called the Dutch test. And that is done during testing your urine. And that will look at your cortisol, your adrenal hormones, your female hormones, your thyroid hormones, and gives a much better picture. And then the other type of test you can do is a saliva test over 24 hours. And again, that gives you a true hormone profile. And with that information, you're much better equipped to really know if you want to go down the test route. I personally think there are other ways. You're talking in a one-to-one situation, you're like, well, that's what's going on for me. Or a bit of education, you figure out what's going on for you. So there are options. The other type of test that I'll just mention that I've been using a lot recently is a microbiome test.
Okay.
So a microbiome test tests your gut flora, and they're very comprehensive. And if you go for a company or an individual, it costs more, obviously, to see an individual one-to-one setup, but you can just go and get the test. You want to go for a test where they have a chat with you afterwards, so that you've got a nutritionist that you talk to for 20 minutes or so as part of the test, or you see someone one-to-one. And what you'll get from that is an understanding that without the right flora in the gut, you won't be producing the right brain chemicals. So if you've got anxiety, for instance, it could be you haven't got the right bacteria in your gut. And anxiety is massive post-COVID. And of course, it really comes up perimenopause.
Is